All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with actor Justin Shenkarow, and you'll notice this one's a bit shorter than usual, but Justin is in the middle of production, and I just wanted to talk to him because I don't know if all of you out there were fans growing up of the show Eerie, Indiana, but if you're a listener, you've probably heard me talk about it before, and it's one of my favorites. So I didn't want to let him slip through my fingers anyway. In this episode, we chat about the legacy of the cult classic TV series Eerie, Indiana, navigating his childhood as a celebrity, Hey Arnold, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and without further ado, here you go. All right, Justin, take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all the above?
I would say I'm more of a book reader.
Oh, a book reader. Did you, so when you were growing up, did you have any authors or a genre that you lean towards?
Well, when I was little, I love Roald Dahl. Willy Wonka, all of those books were I was a huge fan of. Um, and then The Hatchet, which was a big favorite of mine, where the kid goes on an adventure and has to make his way in on his own in the forest. So that's one of my faves growing up. So yeah, those kind of books, and then whatever I was reading in school, I enjoyed.
Whereabouts did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in LA, in
Oh,
kind of the south part of Los Angeles, since I was growing up as an actor. So it was always driving distance to various auditions.
yeah. I mean, obviously, you've been in the business since you were a young kid. Was anyone in your family artistically or creatively inclined? Is that what kind of ushered you that way?
No, I wish that was the case, but I was the only one.
Were you a theater kid? Was that fair to say you were bit by the bug early?
I love theater, yes, definitely, and just my parents got me involved in the business early when I was doing some commercials, and that's how I kind of got started in the business, working in commercials, and then segueing into guest appearances on TV shows, and that's kind of how my career began.
Mm. So was music big in your household growing up? Did you ever pick up an instrument or anything like that?
I wish I had. Again, I say I'm a single threat, not a triple threat. I could only act. I can't sing or dance.
So, something I like to ask everyone, man, you take it whichever direction you want to go, is what scared you as a kid?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think the only thing that maybe scared me at night was the boogeyman underneath the bed. But besides that, I think I was pretty fearless.
Mm. I mean, that's a good thing as an actor, right?
Yeah.
So, first time on stage as a performer, what was that? How did it go? Did your pants fall down, go smoothly?
The first time on stage was actually, I think the first thing I did was it was for a Mattel commercial. And they put me in a harness and I was flying around on this big sound stage, which was a blast. What kid doesn't want to have to be able to fly? So in between flying, they also had this big table called craft service where they put out a bunch of snacks, candies, and cookies. So in between breaks, I would go get snacks and then I would go back to being flying around. So the bug was bit immediately, and I was off to the races. So I loved it. I didn't fall down. I flew instead.
So, speaking with a lot of actors over the years, and us non-actors, we always hear the term method acting, and I
Mhm.
think it's kind of muddled these days. So, what is your method? Now, I've discovered that most actors just have pieced together little nuggets that have worked for them individually.
Yeah, that's actually a good response that other actors have given you. I guess I'd probably fall in the same category. I grew up in acting class for many, many, many years and studied Stanislavski, which is the method of imagination, and really kind of tapping into your imagination, playing make believe, putting yourself in any scenario. And we've all kind of had scenarios that are somewhat similar, even if they're totally different. I mean, my acting teacher used to say anybody could be a murderer. If you step on an ant or you step on a bug when you walk, you're a murderer, right? So, I mean, even though it's quite different, it is somewhat true. So, I'd say my method is usually just imagination, but of course, the more research that I do on a character and the more time I can spend on a script and a character, the more I feel fully invested. but I'm not the method actor where, show up on set fully in character for 3 months, never break character, which some actors are, but it's kind of a combination.
Mm. How much work do you do behind the scenes with a character? Do you make a journal or anything like that? Is that what you do just to build the history up and help you kind of slip into it?
Yeah, yeah. So it's again using the imagination, who, what, where, when, how, the family history of the character, the likes, the dislikes, all of that stuff. The more I'm able to invest in the character and use my imagination, the more I really feel that I put the clothes on and become the character.
Mm. So about a few weeks ago, I was talking with Rob Yescom. He's a writer. He just wrote the Jackpot movie for Amazon with John Cena.
Oh, cool.
And I was asking him his favorite childhood TV shows, and we had the same one, which was Eerie, Indiana.
Nice.
And like I told him, I've never had that answer. I've never heard anyone know that show that I grew up around. So it was just great, man. So just take us through that audition, how that came
First
about.
of all, you should connect me with him. That's awesome.
I will for sure
Yeah,
after this.
that'd
Okay,
be
I'll send you.
amazing. Yeah, no, no, Eerie was of all the shows I've ever worked on, that was my favorite show ever. It was, and it was quite a process to get that job. I had 12 auditions, and then I got all the way to network. So you probably know because you've spoken to a lot of actors. When you audition to be a series regular on a TV show, it's typically a lot of auditions. Now, some folks maybe have one or two, but I had 12. So I went to the casting director, and then I met with the director, and then the producer, and then I met with them a few times. And then you have to go to the money people. That's the production company that's financing it. And then you go at the end, you go to what's called network. And Eerie was on NBC. So the last audition is in front of a lot of network executives. It's a very nerve-wracking process because it's usually down to you and one other person, or you and two other folks, and you're sitting in that waiting room and you've already negotiated your deal, meaning your agent has already been on the phone with their business affairs from the studio, and you know how much you're potentially going to make. And so there's a lot of pressure. And so I went, and I thought I did a great audition. And then, a few days later, my agent contacted me back and said, they really like you, but they're going to re audition for the role. And I'm like, what? Really? So they went and re auditioned a lot more kids and started the beginning of the process with other kids. And then I think it was about a month later, I got a call, and my agent said, they want you to come back to network. So then I had to go back a second time and audition against a couple other different kids. And fortunately, finally, I got the part. So it was really a process. But once I had the part, it was an amazing, amazing set. Working with Jose Rivera and Carl Schaefer, who are the creators and still two very dear friends of mine. And they were brilliant writers, and we had an incredible cast, and we had such a fun time shooting the show. We always had smoke on set, and we were climbing through the smoke, and we had our clubhouse where we kept our clues, and it was just very much a family experience and a family bond. And it was a lot of hours on set. We were working at CBS Radford in Studio City. Right next to us was Evening Shade, and then the dinosaur show. I don't know if you remember that
Yeah,
dinosaur
yeah,
show. They were
yeah.
shot right next door. It was a blast. It was such a fun set. It was such an incredible show to work on. And then we got canceled at the end of the first season, which sucked. And the reason was because they brought in a new president of the network. And a lot of times when that happens, the new president will cancel shows from the previous president, and they'll bring on their own shows that they like. But the critics love the show, fans love the show, we all love working on it, and we always felt that it was way ahead of its time. And it was just, it was something that it was like X-Files for kids, it was Twin Peaks for kids. And I think it inspired a lot of shows later on in life. Like, I heard Stranger Things was very inspired by Erie, Indiana. Supernatural, very inspired by Erie, Indiana. Gravity Falls, very inspired by Erie, Indiana. And probably a plethora of other shows. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing to work on the show, and the curse is I just wish we had many more seasons, because especially with, this was pre-social media.
Yeah.
Imagine social media with Erie on now would have just been an absolute game changer.
I think I can speak for all fans. Screw that executive.
Yeah, no doubt. Stick it to the man, Justin. Yeah, I'm so bummed. And I'll tell you, my favorite episode of all time was ATM Heart of Gold. That was my favorite episode to work on, where I got to go to the ATM assignment and and the ATM machine gave me as much money and gave me unlimited funds. And I remember working on that episode. It was the first time I was ever in a limousine, and it was so fun. And then I got to go to the ice cream parlor and eat unlimited amounts of ice cream, which I love ice cream. Who doesn't? And it was just a blast. I mean, it was such a fun show.
The Erie, Indiana, notoriously has one of the most trauma-inducing, mind-bending episodes with, the news drops that you guys got canceled. Then you
Yep.
have that fourth wall-breaking episode, and I can just remember
Yep.
being like, "What is going on? Oh my
Yeah.
God,
I,
this
I
is
mean, it
this
was
heartbreaking."
wild. It was wild. I mean, the creators really were just, I think they were so bummed that the series had been canceled because they put their heart and soul into it, just like we did as actors, and the whole crew did as well. So they're like, you know what? F this. We're gonna do what we want. We're gonna end this series on a crazy, wild note. And that was such a fun episode because I got to play like this exaggerated form of a child actor where I was on the phone with my agent, and I loved it because I got to drive around finally in the golf cart. They never allowed me to drive in the golf cart before because they're like, oh, it's too dangerous. Because I was only 11 when I was working on it. But then I got to drive the golf cart and play like this horrible child actor on the phone with my agent. It was such a funny episode. And then Marshall didn't know what was going on, right? He was like, what am I doing in this world? Yeah, I mean, just wild. Like that was something nobody had ever done before. We also had the most expensive set in history up until that point. We did the episode The Lost World. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember that one where like that extra sock goes to, and you're like, where did that sock go to? And where do all these things that you lose go to? And it went to the Lost World. And I remember we were we showed up on that stage and it was just spectacular. They had stuff stuck to the wall and it was mind-bending. I think that was $1 million set. And the network was like furious. How could you spend this much money? But it was like, everything on Eerie was done the right way. It was done spectacularly. It was done so that the fans could love it. And they never cut any corners. They did it the right way. And it was just amazing.
Do you think a lot of that leeway that you guys had a lot to do with Joe Dante's involvement?
Yeah, I mean Joe was a brilliant visionary, right? I mean, one of the most legendary directors of all time, coming from epic films that are just, cult classics. So I think, having him involved especially the director of the pilot, he really set the tone and he had a lot of power and sway, especially back then. So I think they gave him a lot of leeway and gave the show a lot of leeway in terms of spending and making sure it had the right tone and the right vision set for it. And as you said earlier, I just wish that the president of NBC, the one who had picked up our show, had stayed on another 10 years and we would have continued to have the show on.
Yeah, I know. A few years after that, there was that short-lived spin-off, The Other Dimension, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Did you ever get contacted for that at all?
Two thumbs down. It sucked.
I couldn't make it past the first episode, I'm being
It was
honest.
horrible. It was horrible. I think, I mean, they shot it up in Canada and they had probably no budget for it and it just looked so bad and it wasn't done the way Eerie, should have been done. I think the reason why that show ended up happening was because years later, I think it must have been in the early 2000s, Fox Kids had picked up Eerie and they started running it again, which is how
Hmm.
it kind of garnered a whole new audience and it became a huge hit. It became a massive hit. And they were like, okay, we got to make new episodes of this, but they didn't want to spend any money. So, they go up to Canada, they recast it, they shoot it very cheaply, and it just had none of the real Eerie authenticity. Now, I wanted to remake the show. I wanted to bring Eerie back. And for years, I was trying to get the rights. And Hearst Entertainment in New York owned the rights to Erie, Indiana. And I flew out to New York several times and went with the executives there. And they loved the show too. And they had kind of an army of lawyers. And we were never able to finally, make it happen. And then Lionsgate sold a big chunk of their library to Lionsgate. So I went in and pitched a new updated version of Eerie to Lionsgate where, I'd be the mayor of Eerie and Marshall would come back. And we had a whole backstory thought of, and it was like a much more contemporary, much weirder, darker version of the show, which would work nowadays. and new kids and kind of a whole new show where it was wild. It was really fun and they loved it. But there was this whole rights conflict where her still owns some rights and Lionsgate still owns some rights. So it's kind of stuck in limbo. And I just so wish we could remake the show because it'd be such an amazing opportunity to bring it back for fans and garner new fans.
Suits always getting in the way, man.
No doubt, us creatives get screwed over by the suits.
Are you still in contact with Omri at all?
It's funny. I ran into Omri years ago in LA. We were actually happened funny enough, we were going to grab which we didn't even know. We love this famous Middle Eastern restaurant. And I was sitting down and I saw him and I'm like, Omri, we hadn't seen each other in years. So we caught up and that was fun. And then I hadn't seen him again for several years. And then we started chatting on the phone because he started getting in the Comic-Con circuit because of his movie Hocus Pocus. And so he's really taken on that, which is great. He does that on weekends and along with his business. So we caught up and we've chatted a bunch on the phone. He's a great guy.
Mm. You were involved in a lot of classic cartoons in the 90s too, man. I just wanted to ask
Yeah.
you how did the Hey Arnold gig come about for you?
Yeah. Hey Arnold was a blast. And another, epic, legendary show. Hey Arnold, come here, I'll pound you. Got to throw a little Harold Justin. Um, So
Appreciate that.
yeah, of course. So I was just that was just an audition. My agent sent me out for it. And in that audition, I met Craig, who was the creator of the show. And I remember him showing me a photo of Harold, kind of an overweight bully looking character. And I looked at the drawing for Harold, and I just immediately started to imagine myself being bullied in school and kind of what those bullies, how they behaved, and then looked at the dialogue and kind of created the Harold voice. And then Craig and I worked on it for about 30 minutes. And lo and behold, I was fortunate to get cast and we had a great run with the show. And it's a show that's resonated so well with kids of that era, and I think it was way ahead of its time and really an incredible show that really is uh I mean, I watch it now and I think it still holds up tremendously well.
When did you realize just how big it was? Did you have a moment?
Yeah, it's funny. I've gotten that question before. I had no idea. As an actor, it's like you're just grateful to work on a show because it's so competitive and it's so hard to get cast in anything because the talent pool is so great and there's a limited amount of spots available. And I remember we knew we had something very special with the show and we love working on it. But it's not till many years later that I discovered that it had such an impact on kids growing up because it was about 8 years removed from me, the kids who were watching it. And I remember, I think I was like in my late 20s and talking to kids, and they were like, we grew up on Hey Arnold. And I was like, really? I didn't know, and that's when I started to recognize. And it was kind of the social media. Remember, Hey Arnold
Mm.
was on pre social media. So when social media kind of took off with Facebook initially, and there started to be Hey Arnold groups, and people would kind of start messaging me. And then there was Instagram, and then, TikTok years later, that's when it kind of realized how impactful it had been in that generation of kids. And it was amazing to see and just, feeling very grateful to have been part of the show.
So you've been, we've already touched on this. You've been acting since you were very, very young. How did that impact your schooling? Did you try to go to public school? Did you have issues?
Yeah, I went to public school and then I went to private school. I'm a big believer in kids going to regular school. So I was fortunate. My mom was very focused on education. And so when I would be on set, I'd have a tutor. And then when I wasn't on set, I went to my regular school. And that was, I think, very important to keep me grounded and just being around other kids. And that I think is very important for kids when they're growing up and whether they're doing acting or they're doing sports or taking something incredibly seriously. It's very important to be in school and around other kids your own age. And that, I think that was powerful for my life.
Mm. Just to wind down with these last couple here, and I'll let you go, Justin.
Sure.
What's the best acting advice you've received, and who gave it to you?
Oh gosh. Let's see. Uh I think it'd probably be, acting advice from my acting teacher, Milton Katselis, who was a, brilliant acting teacher. And he would always just, say, just take big, bold choices, make big, bold choices, fly and don't be afraid. Just, and whatever your instinct kind of tells you, jump into it. So if your instinct tells you to sit down or attack or put your arm out or whatever it may feel, just go with that moment. And that kind of breaks boundaries and makes you open up and really makes you feel free. So that would probably be it.
So, out of all the projects that you've worked on, be it stage, screen, vocal booth, which would you consider the most challenging? Is the one you lost sleep over?
Oh, wow. The most challenging. Um, I would say, I did a great episode on a show called Z Nation, and it was really kind of an interesting character to play. And I worked on that character a lot and was kind of very nervous about, how the performance would come about. But I was very proud of it. I think it came out really, really nicely, and they were, uh, I got some wonderful feedback from the creators and the fans. So I'd say that episode was probably the most challenging that I'd ever taken on, and it felt great to really be in that moment and create that character. But every part and every character that I work on has different challenges and different obstacles, but it's fun. If you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing.
Right. So, something I like to wrap up with is, have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event you can't explain?
That's a great question. And I've got a good answer. I used to live in China for a year. I was living in Shanghai. I was doing a scholarship program over there about 10 years ago. And I had a roommate. We were in this program together and we were in kind of in a big room. He had his bed on one side of the room and I had my bed on the other. And he was a big, tall guy. He was a German guy. He was like 6'4", big guy. And it was the middle of the night. We were both asleep and suddenly I wake up to him screaming and he's screaming, and I'm like, what? And I kind of, when it's the pitch black and I kind of wake up, I'm trying to make out what's going on. And I look up and I see him cowering in his bed with the covers tucked over him. And there's a demon standing over him, looking down at him, very, very scary. And I look at the demon and it doesn't look at me, it just looks at him. And I start screaming and I'm like, I'm yelling and screaming, and he's yelling and screaming. And then suddenly the demon disappears. And I was like, what the heck? And I told him, his name was Bernard. And I said, Bernard, turn on the lights, turn on the lights. So he turned on the lights and the demon was gone. But that was definitely the scariest incident that I've ever seen and I experienced. The next day, I moved out of that studio and I moved into an apartment.
Do you consider yourself religious or anything like that, or spiritual, or what have you?
I would say, yeah, culturally religious and spiritual. Um, and so yeah, that was quite a scary experience, obviously. Fortunately, nothing has transpired since then that I haven't seen any ghosts or anything of the nature, but that is burned into my brain. I will never forget that moment.
Yeah. Well, Justin, just to put a bow on this thing here, is there anything that you can share on the horizon without getting in any trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. Please. I have an incredible, incredible show that I'm part of called Spidey and His Amazing Friends. It's on Disney Plus. We're the number one cartoon for 2 to 6 year olds. I play Rhino. It's an amazing, amazing cartoon. And Rhino is hey Spidey, don't web me up. It's Rhino. So if you got any kids or nieces or nephews, it's a must-watch show. And then another show I actually created, it's called The Bronx Buds, and it's with the New York Yankees on the Yankees Entertainment Sports Network on their app. So if you're in New York or if you're in New Jersey or Connecticut and you have the Yes app, I have a cartoon that's on right now that I created that it's amazing. It's an adorable cartoon. It's based on three kids, Riv, Bash, and Oscar, who want to grow up one day and play big league baseball. And so they form their own team, and every week they go on baseball adventures. And the show is all about bringing Saturday morning cartoons back because I grew up on Saturday morning cartoons. I love them. Kids don't have that now. So new episodes air on Saturday mornings. It's an adorable show. Please watch it. It's called The Bronx Buds and it's on the Yankees Entertainment Sports app. So those are it. I shot a pilot recently and we'll see if that gets picked up. And I also have another project that I'm producing. So a lot of fun things on the horizon.
Well, Justin, thank you, man. Just got to say, you made my childhood fun. You had
Oh,
memorable
thanks.
moments watching that show, and keep fighting that fight, and hopefully you get those rights.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Justin, and thanks for having me on your show. Super fun to chat with you.